Have you ever wanted to just kind of get an overview of what's happening in the Bible? We're going to take a step in that journey in this video. Now, this is part of a larger series of videos called The Disciple. If you go to our YouTube channel, Bethel Pittsburgh, under playlists, you'll find a playlist titled The Disciple. And in there, we're walking through all the different aspects of the faith in order for us to grow and develop as followers of Jesus Christ. And you'll notice that in the playlist, the video titles are giving us the sections of this series. And you'll see the title will be The Disciple and then a category. This one is under Bible Knowledge. And at this point, what we're going to do in Bible Knowledge, we've done a number of overview things, general overview things. And in this section, we're going to start splitting about four different directions. We're going to do summaries of the various books of the Bible, and then we're going to do topical studies, character studies, and commentary, taking sections of the Bible and doing commentary. So this one is a book summary on the book of Genesis. So what happens in the book of Genesis? And I'm going to give you a summary of that. And it starts the first two chapters of Genesis. So Genesis as a whole, actually, the term Genesis means beginning or the beginnings, and that book is basically that. It's the beginnings of a few different things. It's 50 chapters long. The first two chapters are accounting the creation of the material universe. So you have some accounting of that, and then you have chapter 3 is when you have the fall of man. So they're in the Garden of Eden, and they rebel against God's created order, and they reject that. They want to be in control, and they make choices that result in that. And the result is they're expelled from the garden, and God responds to their brokenness by making the first messianic prophecy that God's going to send a descendant that's going to resolve these things. But at that point, humanity just continues to spiral, and chapters 4 to 11 account that continued downward spiral of the condition of humanity. You see that in chapter 4 with Cain and Abel, plus some other descendants creating issues. Chapter 5 is counting the descendants of Adam. Chapters 6 to 9 is Noah and the flood. Then you get chapter 10, you get Noah's descendants, again, more breaking down. And chapter 11 is when you get the Tower of Babel, where the people got together to work against God, and God had come down and destroy their tower. So the first 11 chapters is giving us a larger overview of human history. In chapter 12 is when the Bible starts to narrowly focus on the people of Israel, and in the form of the patriarchs, starting with Abraham. Initially Abram, then his name gets changed to Abraham, and he begins to follow the Lord. The Lord calls him to be a blessing to all nations. And so there's still a focus on pursuing all of humanity, but now through at this point, the Jewish race. Abraham, his life is chapters 12 to 25, but Isaac comes in earlier than that, so there's overlap. Jacob will surface somewhere around that point as well. And in chapter 12, Abraham journeys from his homeland to ultimately down to Egypt. He denies that his wife, Sarah, is his wife. There's complications that come from that. Chapter 13, he ends up in conflict with Lot, and Lot decides to go his own separate ways. Chapter 14, there is this war conflict between Abraham's people group and some other kings in the area, and he wins. He's victorious, and then he meets a guy by the name of Melchizedek, who gets referenced later in Hebrews as a messianic figure, a pre-incarnate manifestation of Jesus Christ. Then in chapters 15 to 18, deal with the promised son, and Abraham and Sarah trying to make it happen because they're growing impatient, so they work through Hagar, one of his servants, to conceive, and that results in Ishmael. That creates complications later from the Arab people. And then at some point, it's Isaac that is born through Sarah, and we get the covenant of circumcision that surfaces at this point, the covenant between God and his people through the act of circumcision. In chapter 19 is where you get Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed, Lot getting rescued out of Sodom and Gomorrah. In chapter 20, once again, Abraham doesn't stand up for his marriage for the second time there. And then chapter 21, Isaac is born. In chapter 22 is when Abraham offers up Isaac to the Lord in the form of a sacrifice, trusting God, but then God stops him because he passed his test of obedience there. In chapter 23, Sarah dies. Now, Isaac is running from chapters 21 to 25. Actually, you don't get a lot of his story. It's mostly focused on Abraham and Jacob, and then ultimately Joseph, and Isaac is kind of an in-between person. But there's a little bit to him. In chapter 24 is the whole story of finding his wife Rebekah for him. And then in chapter 25, Abraham dies. So again, not a lot from Isaac. Then chapters 27 to 50, you'll get accountings of Jacob's life. In 27 to 28, Jacob steals the birthright and other things from Esau through his trickery. And he runs because Esau wants to kill him. He ends up with his uncle Laban in a distant land in chapters 29 and 30, and he ends up establishing a family by marrying two of Laban's daughters and having children through them, children through their servants. So he ends up with 4 wives and ultimately 12 children that would become the 12 tribes of Israel. In chapters 31 and 36, Jacob returns to the land, which is the promised land that they're actually sojourning in. They don't possess it yet. And then chapters 37 to 50, you get an accounting of Joseph. And chapter 37 is when Joseph has his dreams, and there's a conflict of superiority questioning between Joseph and his brothers, and they get upset, and they secretly attack him and expel him and send him off to slavery, where he ultimately lands in Egypt. An in-between story in chapter 38 is Judah and Tamar. Judah has a daughter-in-law named Tamar, who her husband dies, Judah's son, and she doesn't make sure that she ends up having children. And so she tricks him by pretending to be a prostitute, and he ends up conceiving through her. So there's all kinds of weird stuff that happens from that. In chapters 39 to 41, Joseph is in Egypt, and he is elevating. You get his favorable status with Potiphar, but then he gets accused of infidelity with his wife, and he gets put in prison, but then he gains favor with those in charge of the prison, and ultimately favor with Pharaoh, and becomes second in command in Egypt. And then chapters 42 to 47, Joseph and his brothers, because of the famine, start coming down to Egypt to seek support. Joseph had led Egypt to be wise in their resources and prep for the famine that he knew was coming because of his dreams. And because of that, Pharaoh was sought out, or Egypt was sought out for their resources. And Joseph's brothers came down not knowing that he was Joseph. They ultimately found that out through a series of conflicts and tests. And then he revealed himself to them. They reconcile, and they go get Jacob, and they all move down to Egypt. In chapters 48 to 50, you get Abraham's conclusions as prophetic conclusions as to what's going to happen to the people of Israel. And then ultimately, Isaac dies. I have my notes wrong there. It's Jacob's conclusions and Jacob's prophecies. Then you have Jacob dies, then Joseph dies, and ultimately everybody dies, and it's concluded that they die at the end of Genesis before we get ready to move into Exodus. Now, those first 11 chapters of Genesis are covering about thousands of years of human history. And then chapters 12 to 50, you're covering around 350 years of human history. The patriarchs, each of them lived quite a long time. Abraham, for example, didn't have Isaac till he was 100. So you have about a 350-year period, chapters 12 to 50. And what you're given in Genesis is an account of how we ended up here, where our existence came from, the purpose of our existence, and how the problem, like why we have the problems we have, and how God was planning on going about resolving those issues. All of that is found in the book of Genesis. If you have any questions on that, please leave that in the comments below. If you would like to grow in your faith in person and you live in the Pittsburgh area, we would love for you to join us. We are Bethel Assembly of God at 2501 Staten Street. We meet Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. and Sundays at 10 a.m. Or if you'd like to join us online, we stream our Sunday services live at 10 a.m. on our YouTube channel, Bethel Pittsburgh. God bless. Hope to see you then.